Welcome back. So I've used the Sharpie to completely fill in how I want my print to appear. It doesn't have to be exact, but you don't want to be carving into a area that you're not really sure about. It's best to address it before you get started. If you don't know, you should send me an email with a picture and I can talk about it to you. Sometimes there's little bits of other pieces of linoleum that stick to the surface and you can just pick those off with your finger. You'll notice them once you start filling in with your Sharpie. The other thing I noticed about Sharpies nowadays, they don't make things like they used to. If you're really doing a lot of Sharpie work, like these darker areas, you want to kind of do a few swipes with it and then let it dry. If you keep using your Sharpie, it'll start resisting and gum up, and you don't want that to happen. If it does start happening, just stop, let it dry a minute, then get back into it. It'll start running together. You'll notice with your linoleum cutting set, you should have take them out of your tool by unscrewing it or popping the end off. You can leave the ones you're not using in there or take them out. You should have a small V tool for the most detailed cuts. It's shaped like a letter V at the end. A medium V tool. A large V tool, and a U gouge. These are called gouges. The carving in linoleum is just like carving in wood, except for the carving tools are fixed into the handle. So you have a different handle on each one because wood is more stiff and can have knots in it, and you have to push a little harder. The linoleum cutting tool, you can interchange these different gouge heads. So to take this apart, because sometimes you have to, it has a couple pieces in there. Now I refer to these sometimes as a little bullet or the little space shuttle, not shuttle, but the little capsule. Notice how they fit together. They're machined like one piece. But see how they fit together like that? Take the little bullet, drop it, the front of the bullet, into the end of your linoleum cutting set, and you want to screw it on just a little bit. Sometimes if you're having a hard time getting your blades or your gouge heads in there, you want to take that apart and make sure that it's coming apart. If you can see inside of there, where those pieces are apart, you're going to slip the neck of your gouging tool up to the spoon into the holder, then twist the handle. It doesn't have to be right at the end of the spoon, but that's where it's strongest. See how it's wider here? If you can only get a little bit in there, try to hold it still, maybe take it apart, and what happens is those two pieces that we dropped in there, the bullet, they kind of wedge together as it gets tighter, and it holds that gouging head in place. You can always contact me if you have a lot of trouble with that. You always want to try to be close to the dish of the cutting tool, because if you press down at a certain angle and you're not close to that strongest part, it could snap the neck and then you're not really using that blade anymore. So talking about carving, I've given you all a piece of non-skid surface, like the covering you can put in a silverware drawer so the silverware tray doesn't slide around. I don't use that all the time, but you certainly can. You would set that down. I forgot to bring it. Sorry. I would set that down, and I would set my linoleum carving tool on it. I tend to hold the tool with both hands. What you do not want to do is be holding it with one hand and holding your linoleum with the other hand, to where if it skips across, you jam it into your hand. That's no fun. Blood can stain your clothing. You don't want that to happen. What I like to do is keep both hands on my carving tool. So if I'm going to carve something, I will place my small gouge. I usually start, even if I'm going to do something large where I'm removing a lot of material, I'll start with the small gouge. And so I'll kind of show you what I would do to carve this out. I place just that very tip, so where the V comes in, just the very tip of that. If I was to draw how much of the gouging tool I'm going to use, if this is the end of the V blown up, magnified, I'm really thinking about it like this. I'm trying to just use that very tip of my carving tool. And so I'm going to plant it in the linoleum, and then with both hands on the tool, how do you cut yourself this way? I'm not going down so far that I'm exposing the back of the burlap. You can go down that far, but if you do plunge the tool in farther than the end of the knife and you come up, it's going to tear your linoleum and it won't look crisp. And the goal of having a linoleum cut is a nice crisp graphic image. So see, I tend to resist with this finger as I'm pushing with this finger, but I'm not pushing so hard and holding down so much that it's making me tired. I tend to not work from the edge in. Sometimes I'll come in just a little bit. It's best to start a little shallow, and then you can always get a little bit deeper as you start with that shallow carving. Let's say you want to remove a lot of this material, but you don't want to painstakingly go through all of that, or you're afraid you're going to cut into this dark area. What I like to do, being lazy, is I'll take my small gouge, put it in this area that I want to carve, and I will remove some of it. And then I can always carve up to it. I like to carve with the contours of the forms. If you don't want to do that, you can take a knife and you can, let's say I want to carve this line, but I don't want to cross into that dark area. You can just make a cut, incise your linoleum like that, and when I carve up to that cut mark, it'll just pop out of there nice and clean. Sometimes these sets come with a straight edge, and I didn't include that in your sets because I feel they're hard to use. You should just use a utility knife or some other blade that you could incise into your linoleum. Again, you don't have to cut all the way in. You're only really cutting about 1/16 of an inch at most in there. If you do get all the way down, it's okay. It's just going to print white. I will continue to carve on this and work it until I think I'm done. Areas that are dark, I knew I wanted some snowflakes on there. Sometimes I'll just start carving in it where I think I want things to happen. Or I'll take a white Conte crayon or white color pencil and add things in the dark areas. Like with these snowflakes, I don't want them all the same. So you can take a nail and you can hammer it in, or you can just kind of push it in, and that pushes that linoleum down and it won't print. So when we go to print, we ink up, ink will not stick right where that is. Sometimes I twist it. I'm really strong, so I can do it without a hammer. But you could take a hammer and tap, 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 tap in different areas if you wanted to make some highlights or just specks of white, because see, we're removing that linoleum. I will continue to carve on this and show you how to print these once I've carved it. It's always a good idea to take a break and get back from it and set it away from you and set it up so you can decide if I'm done carving, if I need to adjust my drawing. Again, I'm going to do some more snowflakes around. I'm going to carve out everything that is not my Sharpie line. What I am carving is going to remain white. So I want to leave the lines, so I'm going to carve on both sides of these lines. I'm not one of those people that has to carve exactly what I've drawn, but I try to get pretty close. But you have to have a little forgiveness to that. So I'm carving on both sides, leaving the lines that I've drawn. So when I print it like a stamp, and I've rolled ink on there, and I print this print, and it is reversed, I'm printing the peaks, not the valleys. Remember with Italio, we printed the valleys because we used our stylus to create both sides of that asphalt, that line, left two sides of the asphaltum, and ink we would scrape into it. Well, we're going to roll ink across the surface and print it that way. So the next video, I'll be talking about how to print and make your edition. Thanks.